Welcome to the Nashua Cloud.net user group. Our Meetup page is meetup.com Nashua AUG. Udai and I've been helping out for a very long time, I guess. And we do presentations. We also welcome anybody else who wants to do presentations. We had some good ones actually quite recently. So if you're ever interested in presenting, just reach out to one of us and we'll get you all set up. And we're very flexible on the day/time the presentation's done. So yeah, so I welcome anybody who wants it. And feel free during the presentation to ask any questions. Just put your questions in the chat and Udai will float the questions on up. Today, actually, let me do a little bit more housekeeping. There is a YouTube at NH Cloud, and this is where we place our videos of the presentation afterwards, usually a few days afterwards. So you can, if you missed something or want to replay, you can always go there to catch up on it. Today, I will be talking about Azure Networking 103, getting started with cloud networking. So basically, it's a very high-level overview of not necessarily virtual, of networking in Azure. So this is like a great introductory. So I do a soft touch on several different services. In addition, I had done a last week, I think, or a few weeks ago, Azure Compute 102. And then before that, I did a Azure Storage 101. And those can be found on the YouTube. Like there's a 102 here. These slides will be available at github.com, Daniel E. Colón. The 103 is not available yet. I always wait a day, try to correct anything I have as I come across it, so it'll be correct when I upload.
Yeah.
This is me. I have a few certifications and a big proponent of cloud stuff. So welcome, Azure Networks 103, getting started with cloud networking. And sort of, so the idea behind the 101, 102, 103 was just sort of set up a foundation or the pyramid of Azure. The way I see it, may not necessarily be the foundation, but, storage, compute, network, those are, you got to really know those three to get around, is my thought. And so within Azure Networking, there's several different things. But you can think of networking as connecting two resources from distant places. Some key services we'll look at is not necessarily all of these, or maybe all, maybe more, depending on time, and some load balancers, application gateway, front door, Azure DNS. Another one here I didn't list is, of course, Azure Virtual Networks. The benefits, well, you can global scale, the resilient, the secure, and pay-as-you-go model has changed over the past, 15 years or more of using cloud services. It's just the cost of acquiring different services in pay-as-you-go has really changed the landscape. And continues. So along with the, AI is now the new kid on the block. So this is just a screenshot of the Azure networking class categories. And I had the ones in the blocks, which I'm hoping to do sort of a soft touch on, such as application gateway, front door, DNS, load balancer, virtual network, and web application firewall. One thing about Azure, everything's in a resource group. So you can sort of think of it as it's a container that holds your resources. Resources are things like virtual networks, virtual machines, load balancers. So it's a nice way to keep track of everything. Also, you can manage them that way. So for instance, you may have a resource group of your virtual network and a different resource group containing your virtual machines, since the life cycle of a virtual machine may be shorter lived than a virtual network, because the virtual machine has to be in a network. So they can come and go, but the network always has to sort of be there, sort of the foundation of compute. And resource groups are free. The resources within them, obviously, you pay as you go. You pay for what you use. And this is just sort of the hierarchy, so you get a feel of, as you navigate through the Azure portal, you have an account, you can have one or more subscriptions. Most people only have one. Resource groups, you'll have 0 more resource groups, and you'll have 0 more resources in a resource group. So you can create a resource group with no resources, but you can't create a resource without it being in a resource group. And I'm sure there's exceptions to every role, so there may be an exception to that, but for the most part, all resources are in a resource group. Oh, and here's one nice thing about resource groups is it makes it so if I create everything in a resource group like I will today, it'll all be in one resource group. And when I'm done with the presentation, I can delete that resource group and it will delete all the artifacts, all the resources that I created. So it's very easy, instead of having to go and search, did I create this? Where is this? How is this connected? I just created, the life cycle of today even though I'm creating virtual machines, virtual networks, sometimes they have different life cycles. Today it has a life cycle that just spans this session. And so therefore I'm able to create it in one resource group and delete it with ease. Some examples of resources, like I said before, virtual machines, storage accounts, virtual networks, network interface, and we'll look at the important distinction is a virtual machine and a network interface are 2 different resources, and I'll try to point that out. So that is important, especially for virtual networking. So virtual networks, they're scalable. You can provide security on them and global reach, so you can create them all throughout the world. Within a virtual network, so this title is called networking, and within networking we have virtual networks. So virtual network, you can think of all your machines connected to a hub physically. That could be a physical network. And within a virtual network we have segments, which is just a piece of your virtual network. We also have security groups, which you can apply rules for allowing traffic in and out of a subnet or a network interface card. So here, pretend this is one virtual network, and we'll just call it like VNet or VNet1, whatever name we want to give it. This gray area is a subnet. Maybe I have web servers in here, so I'll call it SWeb. And then I have attached to the subnet is a NSG, a network security group. And this network security group, I'm like, hey, only allow, port 80 in, because that's very common for a web server, right? You can also have, and then jumping to the virtual machine itself, virtual machine must have a virtual NIC card. It can have one or more NIC cards. And on a NIC card, it can or not have a network security group. So I could have one on the subnet, or I can have a network security group on a network card, or I can have it both. Now, generally, you'll put like machines in the same subnet, and you'll treat them all the same. So then you wouldn't even have a network security group on your virtual machines. You just control them at the subnet level. Hey, I'm only allowing port 80 in. But let's say, for instance, you have a different setup. Maybe one is a web server and one's a database server. So then, you're allowing port 80 on the web server, and on the database server, maybe it's port 1433. Maybe it's a SQL server. So here's the setup. I'm going to demo for you right now. Is setting up a network security group on a subnet. I'm not going to place it on a network security NICs. Now I have links here. We're not actually doing this exact example. Mine's going to be slightly different, but these are very, I've gone through these. These are very good quick tutorials to work through. They're very easy to work through to get an understanding. Let's see if I can. Meant to open that up in a browser. So I'm not going to open every link that I got to a demo, but I want to show you the usefulness. So here's a virtual network documentation. So you can go over concepts, maybe you're new to the concept, get an overview. Here's a quick start. On the left of the menu with the quick starts. And all of these are, I'm going to do all my demos using a portal, but you can use PowerShell, you can use Terraform, and they give more explanation. It's not too involved, meaning, it wouldn't take too long to go through one of these, and it's a great learning tool. So let's take a look at virtual networks. So I am already logged into my Azure portal, portal.azure.com, and I'm going to create a virtual network. So, under Azure Services, I can click here. Sometimes I can find it on the left. I can always type it up here to find it too. Now, as you go through different resources, those will be shortcuts will start to appear for you, so you don't have to look for them. So I can just start typing what I'm interested in, virtual networks. Now, to show you a little bit about the setup I'm going to do is I have a resource group called Networking 103-Final-RG. So this already has some of the examples I was going to work through, and that's in case it takes a long time for a sample for a resource to be created. I can refer to this, and we don't have to wait and watch it and wait for it to spin up. But whenever you create a resource, you'll see a dashboard very similar to this, and then you just click create. So it follows the same flow. I say I have one or more subscriptions. Here I only have one. Mine's called My Examples. Yours may be pay as you go. You can actually rename your subscription. And that's what I did here. Resource group. It just picked one. I have a bunch of resource groups here, but I'm going to create a new one. I'll call it Networking 103-RG. RG for resource group. And now virtual network name. Call it VNet1. Now you have this in different regions. So generally you want to create your resources closest to your user. And so there's regions all throughout the world. So I'm just going to hit next. Highly recommend, especially especially for virtual networks. I highly recommend you go through this 100 times. You look at all the settings, you learn it well, because it's going to be the foundation for everything. We're going to leave all these. We're not going to select any of these. I'm going to hit next. Now, when you create a virtual network, it gets an address space. And so I'm going to use this. And it's going to create a default subnet. Well, I don't like the word default, so I'm just going to edit this and change it. We'll call it sweb. for subnet web. I'm going to hit save. Oh, at the same time, here's a network security group. So I can attach this to the subnet. I don't have to, or I can attach one to a VM when we create it later to the network card. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and create one. And I'm going to call this sweb-nsg, Network Security Group. Now, we'll have to go back and allow traffic in or out or whatever I want to do, but it's just going to create this for me now. So it'll save me a step. And I'm just going to hit next. Next. It's going to validate and make sure, like, hey, does everything seem correct? Or I have to go back to the wizard and change a few things. I'm going to hit create. Now, setting up a virtual network. Well, we're setting up a resource group, a virtual network, a subnet, and a network security group. Now, the subnet won't be listed as a separate artifact in the resource group. It has to belong to a virtual network. All right, it's already created. So I can say go to resource. Now I'm inside my virtual network, but I'm going to step out into the resource group so we can see that relationship. And we see, okay, I created a virtual network and a network security group. Now let's create some virtual machines, because right now this virtual network by itself doesn't cost me anything, by the way. So everything we've created so far is free. But let's create some virtual machines, which now you'll have to pay for those. I'm going to click up here. I'm going to click virtual machines. You can type it. You know, you may not have these shortcuts until you go to it at least once. These two I have here are in my final. In case we run into any trouble, we can jump back and refer to them. So you can just ignore those for now. I'm going to say create Azure virtual machine. I'm going to choose the same resource group I just created, networking 103-RG. Now, I'm going to give it a name, maybe something I won't forget, like VM1. The image here is already selected. You know, I must have selected this before, Ubuntu server. You can create a Windows server. I'm going to do Ubuntu. It'll start up faster for the demo. You can also choose a cheaper one, like if you're experimenting. Obviously, these machines may take a little bit longer to start up. They may be more sluggish. For the demo, I'm just going to choose this because I'm going to delete it afterwards. So, you know, you take $53.29 per month divided by, you know, how many hours in a month. And that's really what it's going to cost me, which is, you know, whatever that math is. I don't claim to be a math expert. So since we're dealing with Linux, the authentication type will be SSH public. I can say, so when you connect to a Linux machine, usually connect via SSH. I'm going to have it generate a new key pair. In this case, I'm going to keep them named VM key. So I'm going to use the same key pair for each machine I create, so I don't have to juggle all the machines. But since I've already done this, this is the first time you did it. I'm going to say use existing key stored in Azure. The only difference is if you're first generating it, when you create it, it will ask you to download that SSH key. So I'm going to say use existing key. I'm going to select one. We'll see that I called it VM key. And here it says it's, you know, in the network final resource group. You know what? Actually, let's just not confuse it. This is like my first time here. And I'm going to call it VM_key. And it'll be in this resource group. So it'll be a slightly different key. I'm actually not going to connect to this machine. So I don't need any inbound ports. But if I wanted to, and I would need this key, and I would allow SSH 22. For Windows, it would be 3389 RDP. For this, I'm not going to do anything special here. I'm going to go to networking. I want to make sure it's in the virtual network I created. And I want to make sure I'm in the right resource group. So this is the resource group I'm dealing with. I call them both VNet. Well, might be confusing, but that's the one. There's only one subnet that I created called SWeb, so I automatically chose that. Here, I'm going to give it a public IP because we're going to play around with that. But in general, I would place other devices in front of it to access this, to let the internet, maybe it's a web server. We're going to create a web server. Well, the idea behind this is I'm going to show you different ways of getting to making the machine available to the internet. So I'm going to give it a public IP. What I'm trying to really say is this is not best practice. Here, remember when I said you can have a security group on a subnet or a NIC? So here's where you would apply it. And all these changes I'm making, you can, after you create it, you can go back and edit. You can change them. But I don't want any security group on my machines. I want to treat all the machines the same in the subnet and manage it at that level. So now I'm going to hit, let me make sure, yep, I'm going to hit next. I'm going to hit next. Again, we're not diving deep. We're just, setting all the defaults. This won't make any difference, but I'm just going to say disable boot diagnostics. It would make no difference in the demo. Why I'm choosing disable, I don't know, but I did. Okay. Advance. Now here, so I'm not planning on connecting to this machine. And with a Linux machine, what's really cool with this is I can use this custom data in cloud init, and I can pass it some commands so it automatically installs any software or anything I want. I'm going to cut and paste what I have here, and let's take a quick look at this. So I'm going to install Nginx, which is a web server. I'm going to restart it, and then what I'm doing here is I'm echoing this line, and I'm writing out to index.html. This is the root of the web server. So this will be the page that comes up, VM1. I'm going to hit next. Review and create. And create. Here it's going to ask me to download that key. I'll say download. And, so the key will get downloaded. Why is creating that? It won't take long. It's a very small machine. I'm just going to open up another tab and create a second machine. So we'll go through it a little bit quicker. I'm going to say I went to virtual machines, Azure virtual machine. I'm going to choose networking 103-RG. Sorry, that one. I'm going to call this VM2. Ubuntu is already selected. Here's where I'm going to say use existing key stored in Azure. The first machine I created the key. And now I'm going to choose a VM_key. Again, this is if I need to access the machine. It doesn't allow me to go forward and not use a key or create, or it doesn't allow me to not use a key or create a key. So I have to create the key. I have to select a key or create one. The wizard's like that. No inbound ports. Nothing for this. Networking. I'm going to make sure it's in the correct resource group. It is. VM2-IP for the public IP, and we'll be checking that out. And nothing here. We'll disable the boot diagnostics. It actually, I think it starts up a little faster. I'm going to paste in to create a web server. Instead of VM1, I'm going to make it VM2. Next, review, and then I will create. All right, so let's go to the first machine. It's already created. I can click go to resource, or I can always say, hey, show me virtual machines, and then I see it's created here. and the one I'm dealing with is networking 103. In fact, here I can say, show me only networking, show me only this resource group. That way we don't have to look at the others. So I'm going to the first virtual machine. We'll see it has a public IP address. Now, in the old days, you can just paste it up here, but a browser will automatically try HTTPS. We're only going to allow port 80, but first I'm going to try to go to it. This will spin, nothing will happen. I have not allowed access yet. So we're going to do two things. One is DNS name. This is pretty cool. So I can click on not configured. I can say VM1-networking 103. This has to be unique. This is a subdomain of eastcloudout.azure.com. So it has to be unique within that. If I chose VM1, somebody somewhere has already chose that. So then I'll click save. Now again, if I try to go here, one is I didn't give it a chance to save yet. Second one is, I still haven't opened up port 80. So let's go to the resource group. And on every resource, you can look at the top left and see resource group. So I'm going to go into network 103. And here's my network security group for that subnet, which I called SWeb. We have inbound and outbound rules. So I'm going to go to settings, inbound rules. Oh, actually, before I go there, I want to point out, by default, everything coming in is denied and everything going out is allowed. It's that, these are, we won't dive into these, but there is an explanation for these, but I didn't want to get too confusing here. So these are put in here by default. But we don't see anything from the internet. So let me say inbound, add. For the service, I'm going to choose HTTP. I'm going to say add. And see, allow any HTTP inbound, port 80, and allow. And the lower priority, the higher priority. So that's why these have very high numbers. They're created by Microsoft. So when you create something, it'll go before that. And when you're creating roles, don't do 100, 101, 102. Space them out, because you'll find that you'll have to come back. It's like, oh, I got to move all these. I didn't leave any room. So like next one I create maybe 200. So I always have room to fit priorities inside of other priorities. All right, so now that's allowed. In theory, this should work. Oh, there it is. VM1, the DNS. There it is. I didn't do the second machine yet, so let's take a look at that. So I'll go to virtual machines again. And I thought it was stick, but it didn't stick. So we'll see more than one here. So I'm going to go to VM2, and again, I'm going to give it a DNS name. Not required. I'm only doing this for ease of showing us. And just trying to make it consistent. So you saw how if a DNS name labeled not available, try using, because I've already used this. So obviously this is VM2. So I'm going to hit save. Now, if I had this machine here, all right, so we just set up 2 web servers in a virtual network, and we allowed public access on port 80 on it. Now, usually we not allow direct access, but that's the case here. And so this is what we've done. Here's a virtual network, subnet, one network security group, 2 virtual machines. So we saw how we can configure the DNS name, but it's a subdomain for those web servers. Not really ideal, you know. I want to have my own fancy name up there. That's where DNS, domain name service, comes in. Now, Azure DNS, you can use Azure DNS. You can use any DNS for this. But obviously, I'm in Azure. I want to use Azure DNS. And there are many record types in DNS, and we'll look at just really one of them today, a record. We're going to map a domain name to an IP address. Oops. And CNAME's an alias for one name to another. So I can say maybe well, I can show you the difference between a record and a C record. So let's say I wanted one name to be the name of the long domain name that I already have configured. I would use a CNAME. MX records are used for email, and text records contain various information for different purposes. You might have to create a text record for an SSL certificate for verification that you own the domain name. But there's several others. But today we're just going to look at the A record and how quickly and easy it is. And so the only thing we've done is we're going to do is add a DNS out here. And I'm not sure, I gave a presentation on this before, so there might be a video out there in our YouTube channel. And again, this is just a quick URL that's really great. The demo I'm doing will be slightly different. One of the reasons is all these demos are very similar. So instead of creating a virtual network every time and setting up the virtual machines, I didn't need to do that, obviously. So I'm going to go up here. I would type DNS, but it's called DNS zones. Here I already have networking103-final.com. In fact, I have another one here called myexamples.dev. I'm going to create another one. Again, you see how it's just a dashboard. I'm coming up to the left to hit create. I'm not going to say it's always like that, but the flow is very similar for a lot of things. So as you get the gist of it, hopefully that'll help. I'm going to go down to networking103-RG. Again, I'm putting it in that resource group. I'm going to call this networking103.com. I can put anything I want here. Well, that's not true, but anyway, this is one I chose. Review and create. Create. Okay, deployment in progress. All right, it's already done. Let's go there. All right, so networking103.com. I'm going to go to settings. I'm going to go to DNS management. Then I'm going to go to record sets. And these are the default ones. One thing we'll here notice is these are name servers. And yeah. So one thing I'm not doing, right? Well, we'll come to it. So let's say I went to GoDaddy, wherever, to buy the domain name. I would then enter these name servers at GoDaddy. So and then it would know to come here to use this DNS. Now, this is not required because you can use their DNS. But if I want to use Azure DNS, I would just go to the registry and enter these after purchasing the domain name. I did not purchase this. I should have gone through to see if it existed, but I didn't purchase this. But I'm going to show you how you can still test it. It's really cool. Hack of the day. I'm going to say add. Here's an A record. We can also see the CNAME record down here. We can see a few others. And you see networking103.com. Well, this could be www. I can enter any subdomain of networking103.com I want. In this case, I want to, let's do it for each machine. So I'm going to say VM1. And, in testing, you don't want a long time to live. So I'm going to make it 1 minute. So if I make a mistake, it won't take so long to propagate the change. And now I just need the IP address of the machine, which is not that. I don't know where that came from, but let's go there. So I'm going to go to virtual machines. I'm going to go to, here it is, public IP address. That you can probably just type it in there and see the demo live. All right, hit add. And let's add one for the other one. Call it VM2. This one is here. Oh, I'll make that short in case you make a mistake. Yeah. All right, that's it. Now I've set it up, but you'll be like, well, it doesn't work. Well, you'd be right. So vm1.networking103.com. Site can't be reached. How many times have we seen that? Probably a lot. So if I go to my computer, you can edit you can't edit the host file because we need to hit the Azure DNS. So I'm jumping ahead of one step. And I need to go to here, and I'm going to grab this DNS thing because it's going to hit the top one first. So I'm going to ping that address, and I'll get this IP address here. Like I said, I don't know if I can remember that short-term memory, but that's fine. So now I'm connected via Ethernet. I'm going to go to properties. I already had this set up for the other one, but I'll change it. So usually you have obtain DNS server address automatically. Well, I can say, hey, I want to go to this DNS. So I can just type 103.107.236.7. Now the problem is if I hit OK right now, which nothing will break, but if I try to browse anywhere else except there, it won't be able to find the website. That's because this DNS only knows that domain name. So usually you have rootservers.com. So there's like 13 root servers throughout the world, and they point to other servers, and it's a big tree. And but we're at the very bottom. So what you could do is if it doesn't find what you're looking for on the preferred DNS, it'll go to the second one you specify. So we're just going to use Google's DNS. And that way, as I continue with the demo, if I go to Google or anywhere, my browser will be able to find that website. Hit OK, close. Now I'll just run the command ipconfig /flush DNS. And now I may have to close and start my browsers, but we'll see. There it is, VM1. And now if I go to VM2, there there it is. Again, that's because the browser put HTTPS in. That's why it was spinning. And the first one came right away because HTTP on there. So now we're able, we use Azure DNS. We set up a domain name, and we're able to access our new websites with our vanity domain name. Usually you might have www up here or something. And you see how quickly and easy that was. Let's just do a quick recap. So, yeah, so all we've done is put up a DNS there. All right. Well, it's a little weird to have to go to VM1 or VM2. I have to tell half my users go to the first machine and the other half go to the second machine. Anyway, very impractical. So maybe if I had something to put in front of them that would do this for me. Well, what about a load balancer? Sure. So a load balancer can handle high traffic, fairly cheap, and it'll distribute the traffic for me. So let's create one. So here we have all this, and the only thing I'm adding is this load balancer here. So I'm going to just click up here, and again I can type it, but load balancers. I'm going to create this is in our final one, so I'm going to create a new load balancer. And you can see there's different types here. So we're going to go over the most simplest case first, load balancer. So I'm going to create, make sure I'm in the correct resource group, networking 103-RG. I'm going to call it a name LB1, load balancer 1. Here, I want to make sure it's public facing. You can have internal load balancers. Like let's say the web is hitting your web server is hitting internal load balancer to get to some application server or something, so you don't have to expose it publicly if not needed. But in this case, we want a public one. All right, so add a front end IP configuration. Seems like I click here, simple enough. I will call this LB1-IP config or load balancer IP configuration. Public IP address. I want to create a new one. Royalties, let's give it a name. Oh, look, this is pretty cool. I just click what I'm going to type in. Load balancer 1-IP for IP address. I'm going to hit save. Again, I'm not like making a lot of changes on this. The fewest to get going. I guess it looks like you have one point to another. I'm not sure, but this is just our front end IP. This is the IP address to access the load balancer. So I'm going to hit save. Hit next. Oh, backend. What's it going to point to? So I'm going to call this backend pull 1. Obviously, you may call it web server pull, whatever you want to call it. Virtual network. I want to connect to my virtual network in the one we're working on, networking 103RG. Now I can add my targets. I'll click add. These are so you can't choose virtual. If I choose a virtual network, I can only view the virtual machines in that virtual network. So you don't have to worry about choosing the wrong virtual machines if you choose the correct virtual network. Well, I want to use both of these. Hit add, save, and next. Load balancing rule. All right, must need that. So I'll click add. We're going to call this LB1. Nope, we're not going to call it that. We're going to call it. We're going to call it load balancer rule 1. Yeah. And front end IP address. I already have one, but that's the one I created just a few seconds ago in this wizard. I say created, it says to be created. So it's nothing's created until I click create. Not review and create, I'll have to say create. always thought reviewing creates confusing because it's like, so I'm doing 2 steps in one, but no, you're not. You're just getting to the next step. Back-end pull. So I'm going to call it's a back-end pull that we created here. I'm going to come in on port 80. The back-end port, I'm going to go to port 80 because I set the default web server. I set it port 80. But I might have, you might say, hey, I want my web servers to really be served on port 81 or some non-standard port. And then you have your users come in on port 80 and then a non-standard port. So it's an extra layer of, if something misconfigured, people won't accidentally be bypassing the load balancer. It helps out. Health probe, it checks to make sure everything's alive. So I'm going to call it health probe 1. Obviously, it's got to check port 80. That's the only thing that it can check because that's the only thing I have running on port 80. Then we're just going to hit save. Then we'll go to next. I'm not going to do anything here. No rules. Just whatever's allowed out will go out. No tags. Review and create is really, I think it should be called review. And now I'll hit create. And it will create that load balancer. And it is creating it as we speak. So it created the IP address. It created the load balancer. And now it's updating the NICs on those 2 VMs I selected. And it's done. Let's check this out. So if I go to settings, front-end IP, let's see what the IP address is. Let's see what happens. So I'll start using these other tabs. Cool, VM1. So it went there. If I hit refresh a bunch of times, you'll notice it never changes. That's because it uses, I'll paste that in there, but maybe I'll go to Google. It uses a, what do they call it? 5-tuple hashing algorithm. So I haven't read that through, but basically it's not round robin. So you're not going to see anything happen. Well, that's, how do I know it's working? Well, load balancer, if something falls behind it, I shouldn't know about it, right? So let's go to virtual machines. I'm going, which one are we seeing? VM1. So I'm going to go to VM1. I'm not going to delete it. I'm just going to stop it. And stop it. So keep hitting. See, immediately went to VM2. So we know it's load balancing, and it did work. That our end users will still be able to get to our websites. So I'm going to start VM1 up again. And let's check out, we're going to go back to the load balancer. I'm sorry. Yeah, we're doing load balancers. And let's take a look. And really what I want is my users not to have to remember this IP address here. It'd be really cool if they didn't have to. So let's go to our DNS. And networking103.com. Record sets. I'm going to add a new record set. Again, an A record. Gonna make it, just 1 minute. Putting in the front-end IP address to the load balancer. And instead of VM1 or VM2, we'll just call it VM. Or no, you know what? Let's call it LB1 for load balancer. That's what we're hitting. Hit add. So now if I was to go to lb1.networking103.com, it should work. Oh, again, I have to make sure I type HTTP because we're not, and there it is. It went to 2. Obviously, that very efficient algorithm is not going to give us the pleasure of seeing VM1 and VM2 switch back and forth. All right, so that's the load balancer. Cool. Oh, that jumped up ahead. And all right, so we did load balancers, and basically we set up the DNS for it. It hit the load balancer. We saw how traffic was able to still serve up. Traffic was still able to be served via load balancer, even when one of our VMs went down. Oh, so let's get a. So that was I think layer 4. Anyway, it's low cost. It can handle high traffic, but let's say we need more fine grained routing. Well, then we'll use an application gateway. And this allows us to host different websites, to allow us to do different things because it inspects, it works at HTTP and HTTPS. So we can say, hey, if the path is this, go here. Instead of having just all the web servers be the same, maybe one web server is serving up docs and the other one is serving up videos. And then we can scale them differently, right? They could be completely different machines. And so then we can route our traffic according to the path. And so this would be our new setup. Now the application gateway lives in its own subnet. We don't need a load balancer, but we could have one. So I left it in here. So this could go to the load balancer, or it could just have the VMs as a backend pool. For this demo, we're going to use the VMs as a backend pool. And let's create some. So I'm going to go to application gateways. I'm going to create one. Again, the flow is very nice and easy. I'm going to go to networking 103-RG. Let me see what I called this. Just to keep the naming consistent. Name's not really that important, but that's what I practice with. Okay. It has auto scaling, which is really cool. So minimum 0, max of 10. I'm just going to say, let's not do auto scaling. We're not doing that demo today. We're just setting up an app gateway. I want to play around with it. So I'm going to select the virtual network. Again, it's going to be VNet 1. Front end. Oh, okay. So you will, so this is, these errors are good. So in this virtual network, I have one subnet. But I just a second ago said the application gateway has to live in its own subnet. So I'm going to say manage subnet configuration. I could do it from here. I can even go back to the virtual network resource and configure it there. And you don't want to click this. This is creating it a different way. So I'm going to go subnet. I don't want it to be called default. I'm going to call it subnet app gateway. And I'm going to hit add. I'll give it a second. Now, when I'm in this wizard, it's a little confusing where you are because I went to another place. I clicked the link. Oh, can't I called S. I must have. All right. Sorry about that. I mistyped. I'm just going to delete it. We'll hit delete and we'll recreate it. No harm, no foul. All right. Call it S App Gateway and hit add. When you're in these wizards, one thing to note is I hit add. Oh, there's no save. Sometimes you got to make sure there's a save hidden somewhere. You got to hit save. So I'm done here. But how do I get back to the wizard? Well, here it is. Create application gateway. So look at your breadcrumb and just dive one to the VNet. So now I can click here to get to continue. I could probably click this too, but we're going to click here. So now I'm back, and now I can select my subnet app gateway I created. Now I'm going to go to front ends. We're going to add a new front end, and we're going to call it app gateway -IP. I'll hit next. Add a backend pull. Now this, the backend pulls are not shared between the load balancer and the application gateway. They're completely separate. So backend pull 1, they even have the same name. Target, I'm going to say virtual machine and virtual machine. So there's a lot of different ways. You can see a virtual machine scale set, group of computers, an app service. I can choose the IP address. Easy enough to just put in the name. I'm going to hit add. I'm going to hit next for configuration. Now we did the front ends and we created the back end, and you can see them right here. So the wizard, I just want to point this out because the wizard's a little confusing here. I need a routing rule. So if I was to continue, I can create it. Nothing's really going to happen. I have to go back and add a routing rule. So just wanted to point that out. All right. I'll call it rule 1. Priority, I'm going to give it a priority of 100. Listener 1. I'm going to allow port 80. That's good to me. I'm going to hit add. Oh, so now I didn't notice this. So the wizard, make sure I fill out everything. So I was under listener, but I needed to go next to backend targets. So I'm going to choose the backend we just created. Settings, we haven't created one of those yet. So let's say add new. Backend settings. Again, we're just trying to really get it to work without diving too much into all the settings. Each resource, as you work with them more and more, I highly recommend you do a deep dive and play around with all the settings, but it's nice to get up and running and try it out. All right, so I clicked add. Next tags, next review and create. So one of the questions I see is, are the processes we discussed today, some of the things must be performed on a daily basis while working in the field? Absolutely. I do this all the time. I think a great certificate I studied for was the AZ-104 Administrator Associate. And out of all the Microsoft certificates, that one is the one that I think is the most common in use, meaning, you study all these things for a certificate, but everything on there is something you would need to do in some capacity. Hit create. Now the application gateway takes a little bit longer. And we'll give it a few seconds. And so it's already created our IP address. And now it's creating the gateway. Actually, since it's already created the IP address, we're following the same flow, right? Well, what did I do with the front-end IP address? Well, I created an A record for it so I can have all my users access that. So while we're waiting for it to start up, let's go to the DNS zone, networking103.com. I'm going to say record sets, add, and put in that IP address. I'm going to call this app gateway, just so we know what we're hitting, right? Obviously, you wouldn't put the device name up here, but so I'll say add. And so that's added. I'm going to leave this up just so we'll come back to this. It's still deploying. I'll give it a few more seconds. Operational details. Yeah, okay. We'll give it just 30 more seconds, and I do have this set up in our final one, so we can go there to look at the end result. Actually, the only thing we're waiting on is for it to come up, and then I show you. So I'll move to networking 103-final-RG. And we'll see the app gateway here. Let's check. We'll check out the networking 103-final, see if I set up the record set for that. I did not. Sorry about that. So let's see where it is. I think it's done anyway. All right, so we're going to go to the app gateway. And actually, we're just going to try it out. So I think I called it app HTTP app gateway 1.networking103.com. Okay, well, maybe it didn't finish. So let's go to the other one real quick. And sorry about the confusion. So I'm going to take this IP address. I'm going to go to the DNS zone. I'm going to go to the final one. Record set, add a record. I'm just sort of speeding up as we get to the end of time. And we'll call this app gateway. Yep. And then I'll hit add. And it's already added. So now, if I was to go to 103-final, that should have worked. So let's see what I'm missing. We're going to go to the application gateway. We'll just go to this one. By the time I get to it, it's going to be that anyway. And I'm just going through it real quick. Target 0, that doesn't look right. A second hole. I wonder if I chose the wrong one. Not good.
What happened?
I didn't see any targets here. I would assume I would have, yeah, see how that didn't have any, oh, you know what, it was still creating it. I think I just went to it too soon. It's probably working now. Okay. All right, well, I'll just walk us through it. So what would happen is, as I hit refresh, this would use round robin, and we would see VM1 and then VM2 and then VM1 and then VM2. And that is that would be the application gateway working. So since we're close to the end in time, I'm going to talk about the others. So web application firewall is highly recommended, especially as your website becomes, more prominent. I have personally implemented, well, I've gone to a place where it had no firewall, and then implementing the firewall dropped unwanted traffic, dropped the traffic flow by half or more than half. So then you're able to scale back your computers because you're not serving content to bad actors or bad data. Because a lot of times people see an IP address, they'll start scanning it, posting silly requests to it, and it uses up your CPU unneededly. And with a properly configured firewall, you can reduce that traffic. And therefore, the earlier you reduce the traffic, the less the backend has to be beefed up for it. And this firewall can sit in front of the application gateway. It can sit behind it. I don't know if you can sit on both places. Probably could, but I personally like to set it close to the edge. You filter. I want to filter out all the bad traffic as quickly as possible, and that's generally what I do. So each step that goes, I have less and less traffic, and I only have extremely good traffic coming to the end. And this is a great quick tutorial to go through. For time's sake, we won't be able to get to it today, but I highly recommend going to that. They're really easy to follow along. Front door. So we saw an application gateway, which allowed me to scale within a specific region. A front door allow you to scale your application globally or more resilient. Let's say you have a large base of users on the East Coast and a large on the West. So front door, you can have your virtual network, you have different virtual networks, one on the East and one on the West, and front door will steer them to the correct traffic. And that allow you to, lower the latency and scale so you don't have everything in all one place. I did not finish the graphics on this, but the graphics on this will be finished when I upload it tomorrow. And again, the quick start on this is extremely easy to do. I highly recommend it. So for the virtual networking, yeah, I highly recommend. Let's see if AZ-104. Just studying for this alone is really, I find, to be the most useful certificate of all the certificates. Obviously, there's other ones that'll, get you more money and whatever, but I find this as fundamental to everything, It's just my own 2 cents. Okay, so we looked at virtual networks, DNS, load balancer, the application gateway. We very briefly mentioned the web application firewall and the front door. Now, the application gateway, the load balancer, the front door are all samples or different versions of load balancers. Here I even point to 104. Slides will be available on GitHub. And no, that should, we're done there. So any questions?
I just want to highlight a few things. Thanks, Dan.
Oh, thank you.
If you go back to the slide where you have the summary. Yeah, so Dan said front door, load balancer, application gateway, they are kind of similar service. Application gateway you use whenever you want to use like local gateways, right? So where you want to use a web application firewall, you can use with the front door or you can use with the application gateway. When you use with the front door, it's globally filtered, right? So you have the front door is called a global load balancer. The load balancer is called a local load balancer. Application gateways also come under the load balancer category. You can route, Dan was routing to a couple of virtual machines. When you use a front door, way before it routing to a local region. So you are globally running a system. You have a east and west. It decides the coming from the east, it needs to route to east. Before it starts taking the route, it will validate your WAF rules. If it's app gateway, it will route to the east, then the east will validate. If you come from the west, it will route to the west, then the west will validate your WAF rules. There is if you want to design a highly scalable enterprise system, front door is the best thing to do, but it also, going to incur a lot of cost for you. It's not cheaper, because it's globally filters everything. It's available edge based, wherever you're coming from, that edge will resolve all your WAF roles. Then it will, the only whitelisted thing will be routed back to your corresponding region where you're supposed to go. Just adding a 1 cent.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, and so there's a lot of different resources for different slightly different needs. Another thing to point out is like the load balancer is much cheaper than the application gateway, but the application gateway is extremely powerful. You can inspect the headers, you can route it different ways. So it all depends on, I mean, you can use them in a combination too. So you have a lot of different choices depending on your needs and growth.
Yeah, when you use the front door, it's called global WAF, global web application firewall. When you use the application gateway, it's called local WAF, local web application firewall. They are same. The rule sets are same. There is no difference. So it's just a preference, how you want to configure your system. You want to configure 3 different gateway, 3 different WAF, or you want to configure one global load balancer, which is front door, one WAF, which is global WAF. It's your preference.